I've read that before. Holy smokes. Again, I always refer to this. I can't get enough of it because whoever wrote this material had to be educated in Greek education, not just someone at home. They were schooled. And they knew a thing or two. Because when you read Suetonius, Lives of the Caesars, again, I love going to this. The divine Augustus, that's the first emperor of Rome. Paragraph 94. And now that we are on this subject, it would not be irrelevant to add an account of the events before his birth, on the very day he was born, and subsequently from which could be drawn the hope and expectation of his greatness and enduring good fortune. When in ancient times part of the wall of Villatrae had been touched by lightning, this was seen as a sign that a citizen of the town would one day be ruler. Bolstered by this, the people of Villatrae immediately waged war with the Roman people, and on many subsequent occasions too, almost to their own destruction. Now pause for 1 second. Is that historical? Did that happen? Maybe. Maybe the people of Villatrae, or however you pronounce the actual name, Villatrae, saw lightning strike a wall and thought, this is an omen. This means that we're going to win a war or something. They pick up their swords and they go to fight Rome. And they start getting their you-know-what's handed to them. And it's not looking good. Almost to their own self-destruction. So it says that one ruler would come from them, right? Bolstered by this, the people of Villatrae immediately waged war with the Roman people, and on many subsequent occasions too, almost to their own self-destruction. I don't know if that's historical or not. Finally, however, it became clear that this event had been a sign portending, portents is kind of predicting, prophecy, so to speak, but it's really like a sign of something to come. Portending the power of Augustus, Julius Maranthus records, and sounds like he, whoever Suetonius is sourcing Julius Maranthus. Don't worry, I'll get to your super chats soon too. Thank you for all the support. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me, but I'm having fun. I love this stuff. And let's have fun doing this, right? But I really hope you see what I'm doing here. Julius Maranthus records that a few months before Augustus was born, a prodigy was generally observed at Rome, which announced that nature was bringing forth a king for the Roman people. Now remember, kings aren't good to the senates. The Senate did not like kings. There was originally 5 mythic rulers, 5 mythic kings of Rome. They didn't want kings. The first person that they thought after several centuries that was going to try and become king, which is a little bit hazy and fuzzy on what was happening, was Julius Caesar, as far as I'm concerned. And if I don't know, I don't know, but I do know that they thought he might have tried to crown himself as king, especially when he's traveling back into Rome with his soldiers, which was a big no-no. The Senate, he continues, was most alarmed and agreed that no child born in that year, this is referring back to the portents of Caesar Augustus, right? No child born in that year should be raised. So that means if a child is born, they should not be raised. Kill that kid. Doesn't that sound familiar? I'm thinking of Matthew. Herod, the slaughter of the innocent children, because he thought the portents, the signs, the star, the omens, the evidence of prophecy, supposedly in Matthew, that the Son of God or the Messiah has come. As the 3 wise men, magi, the sorcerers of the East, come and tell him, hey, where is this Messiah? Which is kind of silly. Why would you stop? You got a GPS star directly taking you to Jesus, but you stop at Herod's. Anyway, they stop. Herod's like, hey, dude, what? Go find these kids. Go find and kill every kid. They can't take my throne. The Senate didn't want kings. Why? Because if the king took over or became king, the Senate's screwed. They lose their power. So here's a power struggle again. Herod losing power because a Messiah would become king. Here, you've got the Senate freaking out saying, kill all the kids born this year. Don't let them be reared up. Don't let them be raised. Keeps going. Says, no child in that year should be raised. However, Those whose wives were pregnant ensured that the decree was not registered in the treasury. So when they got pregnant, they didn't go tell everybody, "Hey, I'm pregnant. My name's Susie, and I think I'm having a boy." No, they were not registering. They hid it, kind of like Moses, kind of like these stories of old that we find, or even in Jesus' story where they're hiding. They're trying to hide that what's going on. So they even escaped to Egypt. So then it goes on and says, however, those whose wives were pregnant ensured the decree was not registered in the treasury, since each hoped that the prodigy referred to his own child. Notice it says his own child, like the father. I read in the books of Asclepiades of Mendes, entitled Theologomena, that Ittai, A-T-I-A, attending the sacred rites of Apollo in the middle of the night, had her litter positioned in the temple and fell asleep. While the other matrons were also sleeping, all of a sudden, a serpent slid up to her, then quickly went away. On waking, she purified herself as she would after sleeping with her husband, and at once there appeared on her body a mark in the image of a snake, and she was never able to get rid of it, so that ever afterwards she avoided going to the public baths. Augustus was born 10 months later, and for this reason is believed to be the son of Apollo. It was Attai, too, who before she gave birth dreamed that her insides were carried to the stars and spread all over the earth and the skies. Octavius, the father, dreamed that the sun rose from Attaia's womb. On the day of Augustus was born, when the conspiracy of Catiline was being discussed in the Senate House, and Octavius stayed away until late because his wife was in labor, Publius Nigadus, hearing why he was delayed, was, when informed of the hour of the birth, asserted, as is generally known, that the master of the world was born. When Octavius, who was leading an army through remote regions of Thrace, sought guidance concerning his son at home, barbarian rituals in the grove of Father Liber, the same prediction was made by the priest, for so great a flame had leapt up when they poured wine on the altar that it passed beyond the peak of the temple roof and right up to the sky, a portent which had only previously occurred when Alexander the Great offered sacrifice at that altar. And on the very next night thereafter, he dreamed he saw his son, of greater than mortal size, with a thunderbolt and scepter and emblems of Jupiter best and greatest, and a radiant crown on a chariot decorated with laurel drawn by 12 horses of astonishing whiteness. He goes on to describe how an eagle flies by and takes the bread out of Augustus's hand, Octavian, and then when it flies up to eat the bread, it realized somehow it knows, holy crap, I just took the King of Kings food. I got to return this food back to Octavian, the divine. And he comes back and he hands his food back to Octavian and flies back off. Now, we know that happened, everybody. All the things I just read, that's literal historiography. And it's not even as crazy as some of the stuff we hear in the New Testament. It at least says something's a dream. That could be a real dream. That could be based off real history. Like some of the things I just read in Suetonius that seem highly legendary, my friends, are more plausible if I were to compare them over to some of the things I'm reading in the Gospels. And on a serious note, scholars don't think that is what actually happened. They don't take for a second that this is historiography. They say this is legend. And they're putting a birth narrative where he is divine, how his birth became, how he came to be the noble man that he was, and the life of this great man, according to Suetonius. Sounds familiar. Sounds like these authors are aware of a trope and they know how to write great stories about Jesus. Back to the Jenga tower, and then I'll get to super chats. At what point, when you pull the block, does the tower fall? At what point do you go, all right, Luke, Matthew, the birth narratives, highly legendary. They're not writing history. This is not what actually happened. We don't need that. By the way, if you do that, you're already going against some of the creeds about the virgin birth and stuff that we see later on. But let's just do it because we're trying to be honest. We're not trying to fit what men wrote centuries later to try and stamp political power over this movement and keep people in line with what they want to be true or not true. Okay. Birth narratives, got it, legend. Ascension. I'm not going to get into the argument here. Ultimately, I would refer you to Richard Miller's book toward the end here. And I know that Christian Apologist in that one video that did a response to Dennis McDonald mentioned in passing, Stephen Boyce mentioned in passing, but page 175, you could see there's a chart here where it lists missing body, prodigies, darkness over the land, mountaintop speech, Great Commission, ascension, son of a god, meeting on the road, eyewitness testimony, taken away in a cloud, dubious alternative accounts, immortal heavenly body, outside the city the people flee, deification, belief, homage, and rejoicing, bright and shining appearance. Flip the page. Frightened, all in sorrow over loss, inspired message of apotheosis. He goes in and parallels and shows you the sources for this is the same stuff that happens to Romulus. So he's wanting to show you the antecedent, the example, just like we read in Suetonius, Lives of the Caesars for Octavian, how they reference just like Alexander the Great. It occurred only once when Alexander the Great sacrificed on this altar. Why are they naming Alexander the Great? Now, obviously, he is a great example that they want to imitate. In fact, when Julius Caesar defeated the Gauls, he was able to say not even Alexander the Great defeated the Gauls, which meant he was able to stamp his legendary, you better keep me in the Hall of Fame. I did something not even Alexander the Great did. You had to compete. If you didn't compete, back to my point about John Dominic Crossan, Muhammad would have been a nobody if he claimed what he claims in the 7th century in Arabia, in the 1st century Palestine, in the Roman world. Nobody would have gave two you-know-whats about Muhammad if he existed in the 1st century, not playing the same game that the rest of the Roman Empire was doing. If you didn't have the same honorific trophy system in the Hellenistic world, your trophy was dung. They didn't care about it. They did not honor you at all. The only reason Gentiles found this message of a Jewish peasant from Palestine or from the Galilee even remotely interesting is that it had to imitate the famous heroes and figures of that period and before, the legends of their time. It's like football players today. If you're into football, I'm not really into it, but it's like football players today imitating or trying to outdo previous scores of previous football players. Legends, Hall of Famers. Emmitt Smith, that's one that I always loved growing up. He was a running back. That guy was one of my favorites. Why? When he got the touchdown, he didn't dance and spin into a backflip and mock and all that. He didn't do his dances. He very calmly, maturely picked the ball up, walked up to the ref, handed it to him and says, "Thanks a lot, ref," and then went back to his bench. Very humble, kicked ass, took names, chewed bubblegum and kicked ass, had no more bubblegum to chew, was just kicking ass. And he's someone that people today, if they're running backs, want to compete with. Michael Jordan, Arnold Schwarzenegger in bodybuilding, Michael Jordan in basketball, you name it, right? Whatever the sport is, they're trying to compete. And if they don't compete, they're nobody. Simple as that. All right. Have you had enough fun with me rambling for 52 minutes? Jeez. I have gone on a rant. Please forgive me. Thank you for 354 people watching. Hit the like button so you can also have an apotheosis upon your slumber, your end of this little mortal life that we have here on Earth. On a serious note, thank you for everyone who likes and comments and is engaging in the chat, even the ones I disagree with. I appreciate everybody being here. Now, scrolling up, I missed a super chat here at the top. Constellation Pegasus. I used to be mad at you and Neil for the price debacle, but not anymore. Leaving religion changes everything, and some of those changes don't pop up until years down the road. Wow. Wow. Even the XJW community fights breakout. It's like growing up again. Well, Constellation, I want to say thank you. I do not want anyone based on my actions or whatever I do to judge someone else, even if I don't platform them anymore. I want to say something real quick. I think this is important. This is an important point. I have learned so much information from Robert M. Price on biblical studies. I am indebted to the learning that I have learned from him in many ways. However, I didn't agree with him on several points along the way, and you learn and you go. The guy is an encyclopedia. And I hope that his family and his loved ones and he himself lives long, and I hope the best for him. And I just want to say that publicly. I really do. Like Julius Caesar before Jesus, you want to forgive your enemies, which I don't even see him technically as an enemy. I feel really bad because I see that he's kind of a product of his environment, his time, and even his relationship and the way they are. That's just the way that they are. So I just thank you for that massive super chat. And I appreciate you sticking around because I don't want you to feel like that's my goals to be antagonistic to even Dr. Price. It's never been my goal. I still wish things were not this way. I can't help it. I can't help that I have to also stand for what I think is right while he stands for what he thinks is right, and is what it is. So thank you so much for being conscious of that. And I appreciate you being patient, along the way and learning, because we're all trying to figure this thing out we call life. We don't have the answers, or we don't start with our answers and then work to try and back those answers up like I used to do. Again, I appreciate you always. You've always come through and helped support the channel and stuff. And I know there was moments of tension after Bob Price and all that. But I see it also in the XJW community where there's struggles between things that have happened with Lloyd Evans and others. And I'm like, that's exactly what the Jehovah's Witnesses want, actually. They want that strife because they want to be able to get more people to come back. So you see it, and we're all learning, right? So thank you so much for that. Sorry for spending a little bit of time on that. I think it's necessary to kind of say it, because no matter what I say or agree or disagree with Bob Price, I will always care about him. I always have. And like it or not, that's just who I am.